Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in our mini-series on strategic clarity, execution, and alignment. My name is Marcelino Sanchez, and I am joined by Eric Vanderwielen, my partner in crime, and we are your co-hosts for today. Welcome, Eric. Good to have you here.
Yes, good to be here, and welcome everybody.
During the first episode, we touched on the importance of creating clarity around mission, vision, values, and strategy, which is very fundamental. And then during last episode last week, we touched on how to convert those into strategic priorities and define those, as well as break those into objectives, goals that are ready then for cascade. Eric, what are we talking about today?
So this week is all about deciding what to keep track of and how to make those indicators meaningful to everyone. Metrics help you really to direct the day-to-day activities towards your goal and translate strategy into results, and that's what it's all about. Next week, we'll discuss how to use metrics, goals, and targets to engage the entire workforce to create momentum through shared ownership and accountability, which of course is the holy grail of execution.
Sorry.
Each episode is connected to the other, so we encourage you to participate in the final episode as well. And if you missed the first two, you can also always check out the recordings that are available on our website, agilitize.com.
All right. From our first two episodes, we learned a couple of things. One, most companies miss their targets, right? Very few employees even understand what their strategy, their company strategy is. And what's even more surprising is few executives who are responsible for execution can even list three strategic priorities. That's surprising. Uh, Other research also shows something interesting. If you look at the top of this chart, using a scorecard is good for operating performance. You can see the number there, 80%. It also has impact on profits. Uh, and yet, more companies could use a scorecard or an effective scorecard. When you're keeping score, balance is important. For instance, you don't want to focus just on financials. We've seen what happens there, Erica. I remember working for a company that a client that they had this revenue call toward the end of the quarter, and everything
Yep.
was about revenue, at the expense of margins, at the expense of employee engagement, and so forth. So you don't want to lose track of other important things. So having a balance becomes important. So here's the first chat question for you. What happens when you keep track of and make the right metrics visible to everyone, right? So we have clarity and motivation, accountability. In our experience, getting metrics right is very, very important, and your investment here will deliver significant results. So let's talk about why that is. Really, metrics matter because it's about being able to manage and improve results. Okay, manage and improve results, and the easier it is, the clearer it is to not only see but understand what the metrics are, the more effective managing and improving results becomes. Now, as you can tell, we are passionate about this topic. In fact, my friend Eric here gets giddy talking about metrics, and we love to help clients with this kind of work. So let me just take a quick second and tell you a little bit about who we are. Over the last almost 20 years, we have done transformation and strategy work in some very large organizations, as well as mid-sized and some smaller companies. We have developed deep expertise in the fields of strategy, organizational transformation, execution, and continuous improvement. And we have trained and coached hundreds of business leaders all over the world. We have also learned how critical it is to have a clear and well-defined and understood scorecard and metrics. So, a part of our mission is to help organizations to increase their agility to execute strategy. This is our agilitized strategic planning model. And as we have worked with many clients doing strategy work, we have developed the process and the tools to help articulate and deploy strategy. We pay close attention, of course, to helping teams engage in effective dialogue using principles of psychological safety to create the space that allows people to engage freely, push one another, and challenge the status quo without the fear of being punished. This is all part of the process. Today, we will discuss steps 7 and 8, including practical tools for how to create meaningful dashboards. Let's find out what you think about metrics. In your opinion, In your opinion, which metrics or which type of metrics are most reflective of business performance? All right, so let's see what you said. Well, look at that. We have 50% across financial, production, employee metrics. A couple of you said customer, and one of you said business process, non-external environment. Eric, what does that tell us?
That there is in general a pretty balanced view about things that we need to keep track of and measure in an organization, not just financials. So
Right.
that's a good starting point for this discussion.
Right. So there's not one single metric that is the best measure of performance, and you have to have a balanced view of performance to manage business effectively. So let's talk about balanced scorecard. This concept comes from the work of Kaplan and Norton. It is not a new concept; it's been around for actually decades. Um, but it's a useful framework that is still in very much in use today. It's a good way to communicate strategy and to focus on execution. The balanced scorecard basically has four perspectives, and it says that you want to measure financial metrics to tell you how well we are providing profit to our shareholders. That's important. It also tells us the other perspective is a customer perspective, which tells us how well we are providing value to our customers. And that's important, of course. The internal perspective tells us how effectively we are operating in order to create profits and value. That's very important. And then the people perspective or the metrics there tell us how well we are engaging our people in order to create profit and value using the right processes. A balanced scorecard then becomes a set of measures or indicators of the company's overall health. It also becomes your management dashboard or a cockpit dashboard, which is also a comprehensive view of the company and a good way or a good tool for communication to employees. Why do we use or why would we want to use a balanced scorecard is because it creates clarity and focus and alignment around what's critical to the organization. It also facilitates execution of a strategy by engaging the entire organization, and it enables people at every level of the organization to make better decisions on what to improve and how. Now, the theory behind the balanced scorecard is very simple. Once you establish the clarity and create alignment around what success is and what's critical to success, then you select the right people and you enable them to do the right things the right way. And then people then engage in continuous operational improvement and in taking care of the customer. Customers then will reward the company with continued business, and then the company can enjoy sustainable profitability and growth to fund long-term priorities. We will discuss and show how to map and define as well as link metrics at different levels, but first let's see the high-level picture. In the last episode, we discussed how to identify the vital few strategic priorities based on a clear mission, vision, and values. Again, that's first. The balanced scorecard, then, this approach allows us to make sure that you have a well balanced set of priorities, objectives, and goals at the company level. And then we also discussed during our last episode that this allows you then to break down or cascade these goals at a process level or individual level and ensure that your lower level goals, measures, and targets are also balanced. Metrics then are helpful and necessary to gauge success in completion of goals at every level of the organization. Now, I want to make one note here. The term KPI is probably one of the most overused terms in business and yet one of the least understood or one of the ones that have multiple definitions. And yet people use it as if it meant the same thing. So to better understand this, Eric will remind us of the connection between the different types of metrics at different levels of the organization. Eric.
Here we go. Metrics, they really connect the foundation, the mission and the values. That's the foundation of your organization with where you are going, the vision and the strategy and the objectives that you have. So to get the right results at the business level, you need what we call the business result indicators. This indicates what the result means for the business, and we'll get into how you can define that. And we'll give you some examples. Now, and at the level of processes where all the work happens, you measure and manage the value you produce with these processes using the process result indicators or PRIs. And then at the individual level, you obviously have to ensure that you are really focusing everyone on doing the right things right. And that is where you need performance indicators or PIs. And it's really important to get the indicators right, to define the right indicators and also make the right connections from top to bottom. So how does this look when we apply it to the perspectives of the scorecard that we just that Marcelino just introduced, and what does it look like when we do that? So here's an example of showing from left to right these balanced scorecard perspectives. And we're now using a template, the metrics mapping template, which is also a tool that you'll receive later on today to help you define and organize the metrics in your organization. The cause and effect order of the balanced scorecard perspective is really shown from left to right. Marcelino has shown it earlier from bottom to top, and this is now from left to right. And the indicators are the same from top to bottom: business result, process result, and performance indicators from top to bottom. Now, when we are working with clients, filling this out turns out to be a very interactive exercise. So this is a very interactive tool, and it really helps you visualize how indicators are connected and even across perspectives. Now let's take a look at an example of that. Let's start with looking at the internal perspective here. And we're trying to keep it simple to something that most people can relate to. This has something to do with manufacturing companies, what it looks like. You want to maximize the uptime of your production equipment, which is, among other things, the result of unplanned versus planned maintenance. Now, that ratio is an indicator of uptime because the more unplanned maintenance you have, that decreases your uptime. Now, one of the inputs to that indicator is downtime due to equipment failure. Another one is preventive maintenance. Now, that last one is an example of an indicator that is predictive in nature, and it predicts what the result indicators are going to measure. So this is what we call a leading indicator. Once you have established these leading indicators across the board, you are now in a position to direct the performance towards your goals. Now, here are a couple of more examples in the other perspectives. And you can just take a look at this. These are just examples, but you get a feel for the type of indicators that we're looking for.
By the way, one of the observations that we've made is what we could call the proliferation of metrics. Right? There's a lot of metrics all over the place, but nobody knows, one, what they mean, and two, how they connect to one another, if they connect. So maybe that's also your experience. I know we've seen that pretty frequently. So now, of course, there's more to this, right? But this is the beginning of defining metrics, and making sure that everyone at every level knows what you're tracking and what the expectations are. Let's refer back to, let's see, there's a question here. How do you deal with other people, team members, stakeholders who have different indicators based on their role, influence, department, etc.? That's a really great question, T.O. Very good question. In fact, I think the next, let's say, we're going to show you a tool that can help answer that question. But the short answer to your question is, you don't deal with the people, you deal with the process. You deal with, what's happening behind the process, right? So there's a metric for a reason, and they're measuring things for a particular reason. So it's not about dealing with people, but it's also about understanding, why are we measuring two different things potentially, or things that are either competing or maybe not connected to one another. And so again, we'll show you a tool to do that. That's an excellent question. So let's move on to something that we reviewed last week. Last week, we introduced briefly the concept of the goal deployment process. Again, this concept comes from the Japanese method called Hoshin Kanri, or Hoshin planning. Again, it means planning, and it is a best practice in some of the largest corporations in the world. In essence, your top level breakthrough objectives, as well as operational objectives, are a function of your mission, vision, values, and your DOS analysis, or SWOT analysis, right? And this becomes the why. This then allows you to set high level objectives or targets, which become your what. Then you can break these down into shorter term objectives, then into key improvement priorities or projects, and then you can align those uh, to the balance to a balanced set of metrics so you can measure progress and success. And then from here you can delegate specific goals to individuals and teams. Now, notice that from the very beginning we are using the balanced scorecard perspectives throughout the entire process. Okay, so this is the process for turning strategy into action. It looks pretty linear, pretty clean, but in reality, it's there's a lot of work involved and it's messy in the middle. And metrics play a vital role in the whole process. In just a few minutes, we're going to show you a dashboard that connects, that's connected to this particular tool, which we call the goal deployment matrix or GDP matrix. First, let's discuss how to begin the process of developing your dashboard. Okay. Now, in the book, The Game of Work, Charles Kunrat says, people are willing to pay for the privilege of working harder than they will work when they are paid. What does that mean? It took me several times to hear that and to memorize it before I truly understood it. But what does it mean? Let me illustrate with an example. Uh, have you ever run a 10K or a half marathon or a full marathon? Some of you have. Do you have a gym membership, or do you work with a personal trainer? Do you do exercise programs like CrossFit or something like that? Okay. If you answered yes to any of those, then you have an idea as to what this quote means. People are willing to pay for the privilege of working harder than they will work when they are paid. Why is this the case? Because of, as Charles Kunrat says, because of a scoreboard. So let's illustrate this with another question. Let's say that you go to uh, you know a sporting event. What would happen if a sporting event did not have a scoreboard? Anxiety. Why would that be, Ken? That's interesting. Why would the absence of a scoreboard induce anxiety? It says your focus on the game would be enhanced because you are keeping track. Would that be the case if you did not have a scoreboard? Is that what you mean? I think some people might think of it in the opposite way, that the scoreboard allows you to keep track. Without a scoreboard, you're wondering what's happening, what's going on. Now, if you don't care about the score, if you don't worry about who wins and loses, if you're just there for the social aspect of it, maybe a scoreboard that doesn't make any difference. But for a true sports fan, a scoreboard becomes really really important. In fact, without a scoreboard, you would say a sporting event is like there's no point, right? So dashboards are important in business for at least three key reasons. One, therefore they're useful for effective management. Number two, they help you focus on what really matters. Number three, they serve as an early warning signal that something is right or wrong, and then allows you to take action on that. Okay, so three reasons why dashboards are important in business. By the way, if you have another reason why a dashboard is important in business, please feel free to enter it into the chat box. Now, what makes a dashboard effective? There are at least four characteristics of effective dashboards. They have to be relevant, they have to be very simple, they have to be visual, and they have to be standard or consistent across the board. So again, four criteria or characteristics of effective dashboard. So how do we design a dashboard? Let's get into that right now. There are 5 steps to designing an effective dashboard. We begin with step number 1, identifying and rationalizing your current metrics. Okay, so this goes back to the question that Tio asked, what do we do if we have different indicators based on different things? So first, we identify and rationalize the current metrics. We list all of the current and potential metrics to measure performance. And then we could use a start, stop, continue approach to determine required metrics, because as we said, not all metrics are created equal. In fact, some metrics may be legacy metrics that come from who knows when some executive said, yeah, I need this particular report, and it became a standard report, and now it's part of the proliferation of metrics that you have. So a start, stop, continue helps you to rationalize, and then you can identify the required cadence, right? Some metrics may be more useful on a quarterly basis, others monthly, weekly, daily, or even hourly. depending on the level of the organization. So that's step number one. The second step then is defining the metrics and creating the buy-in for those metrics. We want to engage people in a meaningful dialogue to discuss and agree on the definition and the purpose of the metric. We're going to show you a tool to do that in just a second. And then we agree on the actual calculation of the metric. Believe it or not, profitability can have different calculations, and that's what happened in the story, the example in the story I gave earlier. And then make sure that the metric is layer appropriate. What does that mean? That it's relevant and meaningful at the layer or the level of the organization where that metric is either measured and or reported. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. Um, the third step here is to map and connect the metrics. This is about linking and aligning each metric to an improvement priority and higher level goals, and also assigning responsibility for both tracking and reporting the metric on the appropriate dashboard. We'll say more about that in a second. Then you're ready then to design a dashboard. Again, here dashboards are maybe different at different levels, but there should be a standard way of building those dashboards. You may have a top level dashboard, a mid level dashboard, and front level dashboards. Either way, you want to make sure that the elements of the dashboard are, again, simple, visual, standard, etc., that they are relevant, and that the dashboard is visual, very, very visual. And then once you build or you design a dashboard, then you are now ready to monitor and review the dashboards during regular discussions where you monitor metrics. During these discussions, you also or you need to define how to respond to negative trends, as well as how to celebrate positive trends. In many organizations, these dialogues are called or are often referred to as huddles. We like to call them daily layer accountability dialogues. Those are different than huddles. The traditional huddle may or may not be driving accountability. The daily layer accountability huddle drives accountability. We will explore this concept in much more detail during our next week's webinar. For now, let's just take a look at two tools. The first one is to help us map and define metrics. And again, this one answers the question that Tio asked about, what do we do when we have different metrics and we're measuring different things? We'll also look at two examples of dashboards. So let's look at first the metrics definition tool. The purpose of this very simple tool is to evaluate current metrics and define needed metrics to support goals towards the achievement of future state goals, which is of course consistent with your mission, values, and strategy. So let's walk through an example of this. So let's say that we are interested in improving customer satisfaction. That's a high level metric. The description of that metric, okay, and let's say that we engage the group in defining this, and they agree that the description is we're going to define customer satisfaction in terms of repeat orders and no customer complaints. We are interested in both, right? And then we agree that this is right now a lagging indicator. Now, the purpose of this metric is also something that needs to be defined. In this case, the purpose is to increase revenue while also delivering to customer expectations every single time, which is why we want to measure repeat orders and number of customer complaints. We also now need to then align this particular metric to something that's important. In this case, we are aligning it to the customer perspective of that balanced scorecard, and it is, in this case, aligned also to a short-term goal, which would be part of our goal deployment metrics that we showed earlier. And then we say, okay, where do we measure and where do we report this particular metric? And we said this is going to be layer one, which in this case, layer one refers to the bottom or the frontline level, right? That's where the value gets created. That's where the work actually happens. You may have multiple layers. In this case, layer one refers to the frontline. And then we say, okay, what's the reporting frequency? In this case, the current frequency is monthly. But let's say that during the discussion, the group agrees and realizes that a monthly frequency is not frequent enough because it's very lagging and there's little that we can do at that time to correct a potential issue. So, maybe there's a way to look for either an upstream metric that is more of a leading indicator, or create data that is more frequent and more current than monthly. And then we, of course, define where this data is measured, reported, and discussed. In this case, it is the shipping department, in the huddle, or the daily layer accountability huddle, will be the morning and the afternoon shifts of that shipping department. Again, this looks very simple and very linear. I mean, the outcome, it looks like this, but the discussion is anything but clean and linear. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of often a lot of confusion, which is why clients often rely on us, because we can help sort out through some of that confusion. But you can do this. You can do this on your own as well, with a little bit of preparation. So that's the metrics definition tool. Let's move on to an example of a dashboard. In this case, this is an example of an executive level dashboard, which again is linked to the goal deployment metrics that we showed earlier. This particular tool has both long-term and short-term goals at the top. You see that there, and you can see even the color coding is referring to the 4 perspectives of the balanced scorecard. This template also allows you to break down an annual short-term goal into monthly increments that you see there at the top, and then compare the monthly actual performance against your monthly incremental goals. Green means you hit your monthly goal, of course. Red is a miss, and you can also track your year end. This is what's called in goal deployment terms. This is what's called a bowling chart. And this is just an example of a high-level executive dashboard. Let's look at an example of a lower level. This would be the floor or the frontline dashboard. This is a blank design that we use for a client. This type of dashboard is quite common in manufacturing environments, but similar boards can be used and are used in office environments. We have seen them. In fact, we designed these types of dashboards for virtual teams also during the pandemic, and they work really, really well. In this example, this is a simple SQD. It's called SQD. S stands for safety, Q for quality, D for delivery. And here you track at the top of the board daily goals versus daily performance. In the middle, you track patterns and trends, which point you to what you need to act on potentially. And then at the bottom, you track or you document countermeasures and actions to improve anything that needs attention. And this, of course, happens or should be reviewed during these daily layer accountability dialogues. And the board would normally be in the work area or the space where that dialogue happens daily. Okay. Well, we certainly hope that you have some ideas, that there are things here that you say, you know what, we are doing that, but maybe we can do it better, or we're not doing that at all. And that's something that could be very useful in our team or in our organization. Keep in mind that some of these tools don't have to be used only at the top level of the organization, and that you can use some of these tools in the absence of some of the things that we have referred to in the past. So, for instance, the metrics definition tool you can use within a team, and use it as a standalone tool. By the way, let me go back to the question that Tio asked. How do you deal with other people, team member stakeholders, who have different indicators based on their role, influence, departments, etc.? So one way is to use that metrics definition tool to engage them in that conversation. Okay, what do these metrics mean? Why are we using them? What's the purpose? And so forth. Tio, does that help answer that question? Would that be useful? Ken Fry says, I think the metrics definition tool is a great start for planning purposes, gives you the context of what real work needs to be done. Yes, we agree, Ken. That tool has been very useful in some of the organizations that we have used them. In fact, in every organization, every time that we've used it, it's become very, very useful. By the way, I typically use this particular tool in conjunction with either a process mapping tool or a SciPod tool to understand the process. And then we use a metrics definition tool to understand, okay, what are we measuring and why are we measuring in this process? And it becomes extremely helpful. All right, thank you, Tio, for your feedback there. It helps everyone get on the same page. We agree, it does do that. Wonderful, let's continue on. I'm looking at my clock here. Let's wrap it up here with daily performance dialogues. Eric, tell us about this.
Yeah, so here we are looking at a situation where another organization has implemented all these indicators and everybody is focused. And now how do you make sure that at a day-to-day level that focus is maintained and that you're also building in continuous improvement? This is really going to be a topic that we're getting into next week. But as you can see at the frontline level, you have these groups of people talking, which is the daily layered accountability discussion around performance indicators, looking at what happened yesterday. If not, what things do we have to change? Then the information and the data that comes out of that goes up the chain to line management and up to executive leadership. But there's a two-way communication going on all the time where problems are being escalated or things are being discussed and priorities are being communicated down. So more about this next week.
Yeah, and as you can see here, we would use different types of indicators for different types of dialogues. The point here is that these metrics need to be meaningful at every level and use them to create really robust discussion, as Eric has described. So if Eric gets giddy with metrics, I get really giddy about these dialogues because I think they're the secret weapon of high performing organizations. Again, we're going to get into that much more next week. All right, so this is all part of our strategic planning model again. Today we've gone through cascading and tracking, and we really hope that this has been very useful to you. This strategy planning and deployment process is an integrated and critical part of what we call the Agile Business System, which is designed to increase organizational agility. Eric, tell us a little bit about this Agile Business System.
You'll see the directing system, which is in the two light blue bubbles. It consists of governance, where decision making happens, and indicators, which represents how the business is measuring itself. And we spend a lot of time there today, obviously. Then on the right, orange is the work system, the process, which is really the engine that creates your product or service, and innovation, where you create the better and bigger future aligned with your strategy, with these breakthrough thinking and actions that can actually affect any part of your organization. And last, and certainly not least, at the bottom, the dark blue is leadership collaboration. It's all about the people. Leadership really facilitates, enables, and directs everybody. And collaboration is the teamwork where really everybody works together, creates and fuels everything else, and without which really nothing happens in an organization. Now, this in itself is a powerful engine, but you need the right direction. So on the left, you see the strategic inputs. And we talked about it in the first two webinars, which is really important. Strategy is really important. And on the right, you see outputs of the efforts. And if you do everything else well, then it can actually become very predictable. Now, it may seem obvious that we spend our time focusing on indicators today, but we also discussed how this impacts the work system and the relational system, because really everything is connected. Now, if you want to learn more about the Agile Business System, our assessments and the tools that we have to help you increase organizational agility, you can contact us, of course.
Thank you, Eric. So today we have focused on metrics and how to measure progress and success. Next week, we're going to wrap it up by bringing everything together and how to use the different things that we have discussed thus far to create a shared sense of ownership and accountability for results. And again, a lot of things are going to come together next week. So we're excited about that. We also wanted to remind you, by the way, the link to the webinar for next week's webinar is in the chat box in the comments. So please be sure to just click on that and register for that right now. Also wanted to remind you of our strategy accelerator offer. This is for any executive team or even mid-level team that is in charge of either articulating or cascading or executing strategy. This is Accelerator is a 2.5-hour virtual event with your team. During the intake, we will help you choose 2 to 3 deliverables so we can help you achieve during the event, and then we will prepare the tools, customize the application of the tools, and design the agenda. And then during the event itself, we will get together with your team and go to task. We are excited to work with your team, so feel free to reach out to us at info@agilitize.com, and we will be glad to schedule the intake discussion. With that, today, as our token of gratitude, we're going to share with you later today the two tools that we share with you today: the metrics mapping template as well as the metrics definition tool with some basic and simple instructions on how to facilitate those discussions. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.